that was me. I couldn't wait to ride the Tron roller coaster at Magic Kingdom, but then I got my wait time card back. It was 500 minutes, over 8 hours for a ride that wasn't even broken. And then the ride lasted just over a minute. That was my actual ride ticket. Now, growing up, I don't remember ever having to wait like this. Was it always this bad? Or was I imagining things? So I started digging, and I found out that in 1999, the average wait time for a ride at Disney was about 30 minutes. That's actual data, but today it's 65 minutes, and sometimes it's over 500 minutes. So wait times are getting worse, not to mention the cost, and I wondered, if Disney can't fix this problem, then who can? To find the answer, I had to go to London to meet this guy. This is Thomas Kelly, a man with answers. He's one of the most brilliant people I know when it comes to this stuff. He and his company work on experience-oriented design projects all over the world. He wants to fix theme park waits for good. Not just by making wait times shorter, that's just a number, but by changing the entire paradigm. He has the best solution I've ever heard to solve the problem of rising wait times. This is our conversation with Thomas Kelly of Roadtrip Studios. Welcome to Controlled Chaos. We talk about how theme parks are created from first rendering to rope drop and beyond.
I mean, I'm sure you kind of have the same experiences as a lot of people here at IAPA, where you're talking to people that are non-industry people, and then the first thing that they say, is what are you going to fix the queues? Why do I have to? I hate the lines. Why do I have to be there for 3 or 4 hours? Right. What are you guys doing to do that or to fix that? And what I always say back to them is we as designers and attraction operators always want to get people out of the line as fast as possible, because the theme park owners and the designers, everybody here, makes no money by people just standing in line and doing nothing, basically talking to themselves, obviously taking in the story around them. But the whole point is to get people into the queue, into the ride, and back out into the restaurants, so that they can start spending money again, getting more out of their day, right. And getting a positive experience to come back to the theme park again and again and again. That always then kind of jars them, and they say, well, okay, well, I mean, what are the things that you're doing to fix that? And going back to just kind of going to the history of the queues and stuff, right? Is there's a really good story that I like. I think it's between Walter Knott and Walt Disney way back in the 50s or 60s, and I think it was Walt Disney that went to Knott's Berry Farm and kind of was just learning and checking it out. And Walter Knott, I think, took him around in different places. And I think they were in line for if it was the log flume or an early mine train ride. And
the Calico Mine Train.
Calico Mine Train. Yeah. And while they were in line, Walt was kind of, again, he saw where the line was going. He said, oh, it's not that long. And he gets in the queue, and they're kind of talking, and then they come around the corner, and then it reveals that there's a whole other bit of the queue inside. And Walt looks over to Walter Knott and goes, sneaky, very sneaky. And Walt kind of took that in mind and said, okay, yeah, we need to improve this at Disneyland. We need to make queues that are a little bit more interesting, more shaded, make it a bit as pleasurable of an experience as we can. And that will, again, set us apart from a lot of the amusement park kind of setups at the time, where it's these big queues just going around back and forth in front of the ride in the hot sun. I mean, obviously now we have the wait times listed outside, so it's not the same exactly, but it's to not deter people from going into a long queue. We can make a queue very interesting, we can make it engaging, we can make it part of the show that then becomes the wider experience. So it's not the line and then the experience starts, it's that the line is part of the experience. And I think that's, again, kind of what a lot of the industry does now.
You mentioned a speech that a lady gave that really influenced you. She had an interesting way to think about queues. Talk about that.
When people go onto a ride, right, it's almost like watching a trailer. People should be able to figure out if they really like this ride before they get on it. And you don't want to give away any of the ride. That's not what she was talking about. But it's more about people know if this is the right thing that's going to make them have a really good time, or if this is something that makes them feel uneasy and they should get off.
Right, and part of that is, I mean, if it's a roller coaster, you obviously have a pretty good idea about what it is.
Hopefully, yeah.
But if it's not a roller coaster, if it's a Pirates of the Caribbean ride,
yeah,
it's a ride hidden in the building, building somewhere, yeah, in the dark.
And I think that the queue for, I mean, that's a great example is Pirates of the Caribbean. It's low lighting. There's kind of a few little different vistas. It's pretty calm. It's a pretty calm queue, and it's a pretty calm ride as well, right? So it kind of does tell you, look, if you really like the ride, if you really like the queue of the ride, you're going to get on this ride and have a great time and get off of it, right? But what she said as an example, a modern example that doesn't work very well is Forbidden Journey. So Forbidden Journey, you get into this, I mean, it's an amazing facade of the castle, right? It's a very gentle, magical sort of queue.
This is the Harry Potter
The
ride.
Harry Potter ride, sorry, yeah.
Universal, yeah.
And as you're walking through the queue, you've got, that outdoor bit with all the beautiful greenery, and then you get into, it's past the architect of Hogwarts, and then you get into Dumbledore's office as well, and he has his little bits of information. But the whole thing is not chaos, it's not spooky even, right? But if they were to inject a little bit of that darkness that you actually feel, hopefully not to give anybody any spoilers, but the darkness that you get on the actual ride itself with different basically scary things around Hogwarts is kind of what the ride is, right? If any of that stuff kind of leaked into the queue itself, that would give kids especially a little bit of a hint about what they're going to experience on the ride, and parents as well. So for example, the dark arts room as well, right? We use that as a way to see Harry, Ron, and Hermione. But if the dark arts room was something that kind of hints at the Dementors that were coming and the spiders that were coming, kids and parents would go, I don't really like this room. I feel very uncomfortable. Maybe this ride's a little bit too scary for me. So when I heard that from her, I was like, no, she's completely right. Because when I'm leaving the ride, I always see kids a little bit kind of freaked out, a little bit scared. Some of them are, I love that ride, it was amazing, whatever, right? But other people come up and they're like, well, that's not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Especially the people that don't see this stuff on YouTube like we do, before we go see it. So where you're trying to design the queue in a more subconscious way, where you're hinting to the guests in a subconscious way, what's coming in the ride, but without giving away the story or the surprises, it's more about the tone to make sure that this is going to be a positive experience for them. I don't think any theme park designer wants to have people have a negative experience. You want to put people out of their comfort zone. I think that's part of what makes roller coasters great. It's bravery. But again, the people that have a really great time on a roller coaster are the ones that maybe got coaxed into it by their friends and they made that brave decision to do it anyway, not the ones that the friends said, oh, there's no drops on this, and then right their friends are having a great time while you're screaming your head off. But so it's those sorts of things, right, that I think we can improve on with queues as well. I think a lot of people have a harder time waiting in a line when it's unoccupied time. So when it's has to do with again just sitting there and there's nothing really to look at. I mean, this is kind of given information, right? But you want to create things that are a bit more interactive. So a really great thing that I saw at Disney over the last 10 years or so is their constant upgrades in all the different queues, especially with classic attractions.
Space Mountain had a video game that you were playing.
Yeah, and the Haunted Mansion with the books coming out that you can push back in.
Yeah.
You've also got, what's it called? Just recently, I didn't even notice it the last time I was there, but with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, they've got all these kind of electrical equipment and things. And
basically mining equipment.
Mining equipment,
Yeah, you can watch you can hear a sound, or you can turn a crank and you can see something.
And the thing is like, hopefully everybody, whether they're with somebody or not, right? Like, everybody's had lots of chats with these loved ones all day, right? But there's just, sometimes you're in that queue and you're like, there's 40 minutes and you're like, I'm kind of done talking. My throat hurts. I'm like, I don't have any water left.
You can't really sit down.
No. And any of that little stuff, right? I just see lots of people that are, especially like around 6, 7 o'clock, right? They've had their dinner. They don't really want to chat right now. They just, right? But they'll press every single button and it just kind of, you can see that little spark kind of goes off when they're going back on the ride. So I've seen that really taking off.
Then there's another aspect to that where that actually holds up the line a little bit, because you're in the middle playing a video game. I think they took the one out of Space Mountain, but for a while you're hitting buttons, but then the line moves and wait, I'm still playing here. So it's got to slow down the line at a certain point.
Well, and that's the thing is, I think like it's those quick interactions. Like I think the ones maybe one of the earliest examples that I saw anyway was the one at it's the Mummy at Universal, where you've got it's only 2 interactions in the ride if I remember, but one is you've got your hands on the pyramid in the middle and then somebody else is on the other side, and if it's just your hand, it's a negative reaction. But if it's 2 hands, there's lights and projections.
Oh, interesting.
And then there's the other one, which is and this is the one that holds up the line, but it's the one where you can press a button. I think it's like a scarab, and then it creates a gust of air underneath people. I can't remember if it's in front of them or behind them, but there's a little camera. You can obviously you see the people and you're scaring them in the line, right? And it just gives people a little bit of agency. You know, it's that same thing if you're on a water ride, you're shooting water at the people that are on the water ride. But again, all those little things I think just kind of help people feel a little bit more, you know, more present. If you're going back to a restaurant, right? With the restaurant, what makes that feel like not as much of a line or not as much of a wait is if they give you a menu in the waiting room. And again, what's the things that we can do in the queue that give people a little bit of agency before they get on the ride? Flight of Passage does this quite well, whether it's real or not. They give you little steps. It's like here's a little bit of information, here's a little bit of information, here's a little bit of information, and that whole sequence, I think it probably takes 10 minutes at least to get through the whole thing. Rise of the Resistance as well. It feels a little bit drawn out, and I wouldn't want to do that necessarily over and over and over again. You know, sometimes you just want to get on the coaster and get off, and get on the coaster again and get off. But for a queue, let's say, you know, you're waiting for 40 minutes, if it's something that's maybe an optional start or an earlier start, is there something where could we have an on and off switch in the queue where we can actually extend that pre-show out a little bit to make it feel like you're starting it?
With Rise of the Resistance, there is a queue, but at a certain point, you've got pre-shows, you don't feel like you're in line.
Right, exactly.
Because you're watching a show.
And you started, you know?
You're started.
Yeah.
And if you have one pre-show after the other, I think the best example I have of this is the Alien Encounter attraction. Now Stitch's Great Escape.
Yeah.
Actually I loved Alien Encounter. And I went on Stitch only once, and then it broke down halfway through, so I never got to see the whole thing.
Oh, right.
But there was, you know, there was several pre-shows in a row, all in sequence, and so you don't feel like you're in line at all. And so they've eliminated the line because there's 90 people, but you are in line because you still have to. You're basically waiting to load into the main showroom at that point. So I feel like, you know, and especially with Rise of the Resistance, you don't feel, you know, because you go on a ride vehicle, you go to prison, you're back in line again.
Yeah.
And you're busted out of prison, then you're on the real ride vehicle.
Yeah.
And so that entire experience doesn't, even though you're in pre-shows multiple times.
Yeah.
The detention cell is a pre-show.
It is.
But it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're on the ride, and there's no ride there.
No, exactly.
So they've taken that, I think, rather brilliantly. Even the scene where, and you've been on this attraction, right? Where
I have.
Where you see that you're first captured, and you see the stormtroopers come out, and you can then take your picture. So there's that moment, but you're essentially captured. So that's when I feel like the show really starts, but really you're still in a bunch of pre-shows, and I think that's the way to do it. So
yeah, and the thing is to kind of almost like think of queues as an accordion, right? It can be the same narrative, but to kind of, based on the size of the line, draw it out, push it in, right? Because Rise of the Resistance right now, anyway, I went on it a few days ago with some friends, and it was their first time actually going on the ride, and didn't want to give anything away. And I've heard a few other people here experience the same thing. There's just issues happening with the ride, and so they skipped that entire getting captured by not the Empire, the First Order. And they put you through this kind of gray hallway on the left-hand side, and it takes you straight into
the ride.
Whole thing, right? And from a get on, get off point, right? Cool, great, awesome. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to do that. And the ride queue, it would have been about maybe 20, 30 minutes to get on.
The problem is, you miss out on the story. Why are we there? Why are we escaping?
And they built that into the whole thing, right? But if they had not necessarily saying that we have to have multiple rooms or something, right? But media, for example, is something that's very easy to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, or a lighting bit, or especially with so many live actors, giving the professionals on the ground the ability to change the sequence in the same way that immersive theater happens, right? But something where, again, you can pull some of those narrative bits out to the front of the line, and then if the line is 3 hours long, then you again, maybe split them up between the ride a little bit more. And again, this is something that's a very convoluted, quite hard thing to figure out. But it's something where I think we could probably, as an industry, start doing things a little bit better to make it not so much a 3-hour line, and then we start doing that, kind of giving you the menu at the beginning.
Right.
It's giving people a little bit of a bit more freedom, a little bit more of an experience that's not just visual and audio, but something that feels a little bit more engaging earlier on, a little bit more adaptable, I think is the word. It's an adaptable queue. It's not a queue the way it is, right? It's an adaptable queue that feels more positive every single time. And I think there are ways to do it. It's just, again, it's the questions that you want to have with park operators, clients, and things like that. And as long as it doesn't cost too much more money, or if it's,
Right.
Right? Because that's a big issue too, right? If you have that conversation where, look, we can build this into the queue without it really messing up your bottom dollar, maybe a little bit more operational training or something like that. But if we can get this in a way where it becomes the industry standard, we can leave those certain types of queues behind where, again, you're just waiting in line for hours and hours and hours, and you get to the ride. It becomes a larger part of the show.
Right. And then there's the issue of virtual queues, which I think are a great concept.
Yes.
I mean, let's talk about that.
Sure.
So, if you build a ride with a high enough capacity, there won't be a line, which is an ideal world. The problem is that the cost goes up.
Yeah.
And if the cost goes up too high, well, do you want to have one ride or two rides that have less capacity but twice as many things to do? So there's that tension between how fast does the line move and budget. So then the thought is, well, let's use an app to create a virtual queue where you can be out in the walkway, not spending money.
Yeah.
Potentially spending money because you're in a restaurant now.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the first time I ever went on Tron, I was determined to do it, and I think I got there at 10 in the morning. The card I got back was 540 minutes. 540-minute wait time.
Yeah.
And I actually posted this on LinkedIn. I said, it's not broken, therefore it's broken.
Yeah.
And that's, so what are your thoughts on virtual queuing?
Yeah, I mean, first off, the political answer, right, is that there's lots of pros and cons, right? But I like the idea of virtual queues, but I think the issue is it takes the value a little bit away from the attraction. So, for example, like, it goes back to the idea of it's people would wait longer in line for an iPad than they would a toothbrush if they were buying that, right? The virtual queue, I think, reduces the amount of time that people are immersed in that story, and it takes away a little bit of that tension that people want. It's the best part of the day for a theme park for me sometimes actually is the walking to the park and walking through the gate.
It's the experience with your friends.
Yes.
And in reality, if you time the Hulk coaster, it's only 75 seconds long, something like that.
And I remember I was dating my first girlfriend at the time, and she was working at Universal, and she had all the perks. We had not fast passes, whatever, express line passes for every single ride if we wanted it, right? And we actually started. I think we got maybe one at the beginning, and then we looked at each other and we're like, I'm not really having any fun actually, because there's no tension really before anticipation, right? You're basically just getting on the ride and then you're getting off the ride, and you could technically. The reality is right, if you went to the biggest theme parks in the world, if you just went from ride to ride to ride, if you were a celebrity and rented out the entire place for the day, for millions, right? You could get on every ride within about 2 hours, maybe,
right?
Or
well,
something like that.
And to add on to that, I remember being at soft opening for Islands of Adventure.
Yeah.
Nobody was in the park. I can't remember how I got in. I knew somebody who worked at Universal at the time. But so we went over and over again on Dueling Dragons. Front row, back row, front row.
Trying it all out, yeah.
And it became how can I take this ride again? Because it was a lot.
Yeah.
How many times in a row could I do the Hulk if I didn't have a wait?
Yeah.
So there's part of that experience where it's just hanging out with your friends.
Yeah. And it's really not, exactly, it's not really so much about the rides themselves, but it's the full experience that I think kind of adds again to what we think of as a really good theme park day. I think the ideal waiting time for a ride, for me anyway, is about 15-20 minutes. 5-minute walk-ons basically, right, or less, are great for a certain amount of time, but actually you're basically just kind of, you have the adrenaline rush from the last ride, and you feel like you're rushing a little bit, and you're walking past all this really great stuff.
You miss a lot of stuff, and a great example is the Little Mermaid ride at Magic Kingdom at Disney World, late at night, because it's a high-capacity ride. It's an omni-mover system. Something like 2,500 people per hour, so it eats the lineup. And there's the fireworks and the parades going on and everything else. And kids get tired, so they're not going on kids' rides anymore. So, you walk through this beautiful queue with all this rock work and waterfalls and everything. You just blow right by it, and then you're on the ride and you're out.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that it's that again we as humans, I think, we put a lot of value on things that we've spent a lot of time or money on, and if everybody in the world had a free gym membership, I don't think many people would go, right? But I think there's actually more people going to gyms because they have to pay for it in a way, and maybe that might be an unpopular opinion, but I find that if I'm paying for something, I want to go use it. I want to make sure that is worth it. And so relating it back to theme parks, if you're
you paid for a ticket, and you have a certain amount of time for this. A family of 5. My goodness, how much is Disney now? Is it $300?
Yeah, or something like that.
500, some ridiculous number. But if you have a family of 5, you're spending over $1,000 a day on that park. And so the park's closing at 9. You have to get your money's worth.
100%.
And so then there's that pressure.
Yes, and that's the thing. Is, I mean, but again, people are like looking at the ride itself as the prize, but it's the memories I think people have actually are the conversations they have in line, and the conversations they have at the lunches, and they're exhausted, they're in the shade, they're looking at the map trying to figure out what to do next. As a kid anyway, when I first went to Disney, 5, 6, 7 years old, I don't remember the rides themselves. I don't. I remember my brother being asleep in the pram, and I remember my parents and I at the meet and greet with the characters. So I mean, and that's again that says something, right? What are kids remembering from the park? It's not the rides actually. It's the valuable time that you're having as a family or friends at that park.
I don't know if it was Bob Rogers or Eddie Sada who said that it's not the roller coaster that's the story. It's the story of the little boy getting up the courage to go on the ride with his dad.
Exactly. Yes.
For the first time.
Yes.
And then being able to say, you went to the edge of death and survived.
Yep.
That's the old fear minus death equals fun. What do you think about, there was an attraction that's no longer there anymore, Universe of Energy at Epcot. When I saw it in the 90s, it closed down at some point, but it was a 50-minute experience. Started with a pre-show. Started out with Jeopardy. Ellen and her roommate were on Jeopardy, and one roommate beat the other, and that's, she was out to win Jeopardy, and so throughout the ride, I think she got Jeopardy answers or something like that. But then it was a whole experience with Bill Nye and them, exploring clean energy and the different options, and then taking you through an attraction. But it was a 50-minute attraction, 50. And it didn't feel like that, but then you realize, it's a long experience. But so I feel like that was kind of the answer, because it took a lot of time, a lot of payoff. You got to experience everything. There wasn't much. Well, I mean, there was a little bit of a queue, but mostly it was just waiting for the next show to start, because it sucked in a ton of people for this pre-show, and then there's these massive ride vehicles. Of course, it's not like a small dock ride that's whipping you around.
No.
It was a slow moving. I'm not sure the name of the ride system, but it was a good experience. It was funny. It was good for the whole family, so it fit every demographic. It took a lot of time, so there was a big payoff. I felt like there was a big. They really lost something. They took out that ride as well as the Great Movie Ride. It's the same exact ride system.
And I think it's a good example, because I think about that. Use a different example, but with Jimmy Fallon, the Night Show ride, right? Is I think Universal was trying to use that same sort of idea, but in the modern day. And you still have to wait in the queue to get into that room, but once you're in there, and again, this is another solution. If it's not virtual, it's maybe something a bit more immersive theater, but something that gets people into a common area, a common room to sit, rest. They're still in the line. They haven't given up anything. But again, it starts that experience and creates something that's a bit more of a communal idea, a communal experience versus something that is you're looking at the person in front of you, the back of their head, right? You want to be able to maybe not necessarily play games, but if there's a show or something like that. Like so, for example, like the Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, Turtle Talk with Crush. Those are great shows. I think they're really great shows, but I've always kind of seen those as really great pre-shows. Imagine if you were waiting in line for a Monsters Inc. ride, and rather than having to sit in a line, you had a few different laugh floor rooms, and you went from room to room to room. One actor, one interaction per room, right? But if each show, one of those shows was 5 minutes or whatever, right? And you had 3 shows going in. It gets people in this, and they can leave at any time if they want, if it's too long or whatever, right? But you're still in the world, you're still being entertained, it feels unique, and then again, that payoff is the ride itself at the end. And again, it's thinking about it in a way where we don't want to necessarily speed it up too much or slow it down too much.
Well, I think the word is pacing.
Pacing, I think, right. Yeah, you're right, it's pacing. To make sure that the story is paced in the right way. And one of the projects I'm working on at the moment, we're talking about, it's a theme park, but we're talking about queues a lot, and it's more show-based, but again, it's what I was telling to my clients is that it's the same stuff that we've been talking about right now. You're not making any money if people are waiting in a really long queue and being bored. And the longer that they wait in that queue, the more payoff they're going to need to make sure it's worth it when they get to the end. And what we were talking about was, again, could we have people wait in a restaurant or in a bar or something? Could we make something that is feels like another experience, but it's not a pre-show. It's a pre-experience. It's a part 1, part 2.
Right.
And once you're in this area, could we make it someplace where people can spend money? It doesn't have to be as passive as a Monsters Inc. Laugh floor.
Well, and one person you might want to talk to, I actually had a conversation with a man named Shalab, one name only, and they create a software, and the software is basically can recognize people. It goes over a closed circuit camera system.
Yeah.
And it uses AI essentially and software to recognize that there's a person standing there, that they've been there for X number of minutes. You know that at a certain point, at a certain threshold, there's a problem. Whether a line gets too long, they can count, okay, there's 1,050 people in the line. We need to have 300 people in the line, or 20 people in the line. So what do we need to do to make the line move? Do we need to open up start a show over here? Do we need to add more ride vehicles, add more cast members?
Yeah.
What do we need to do? If it's a restaurant and there's a long line, do you need to have a lot of people? Or conversely, if there's nobody in the restaurant, but you've got 8 people working that restaurant, can they go now do something on the other side of the park?
Yeah, you're right. That's
where there's more of a need, so you have this dynamic manning situation where you can move people around based on the actual need of the park. So it saves an operator money because they're not paying for multiple people that they don't need.
True.
You never have to know when to cut somebody because the computer tells you. When you operate a restaurant, it's all about food costs. So how do I cut labor at the end of the night or bring them on at the right time so I'm not wasting money?
Yeah.
But if you can dynamically put that person in a different place, then that helps save money and therefore give a lot more better guest experience because people are waiting less, so they like to come back more. They're in the park more, so they're spending more money. So anyway, this software I think is going to come more and more into vogue because it just opens up opportunities. So
No, I mean, it sounds great. I mean, and what we talk about at Roadtrip Studios all the time as well is using the real world as a for inspiration, essentially. Where, you know, what are businesses doing to pull people into their business, you know, into their locations? How are they moving people around? And, you know, for example, if you're on a high street somewhere, right, and if your business is not getting many customers, what most businesses do is they go out in front and they do something to bring people in. They give out free samples, or they have somebody, you know, spinning the signs, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, right. So the same thing with theme parks is, you know, a lot of people that, you know, especially around outside of our industry, they show up and they don't do a ton of research or anything like that. They, you know, their research is the movies that they've seen, the characters that they know, the memories that they had, and if they've been before, and they don't consider themselves necessarily theme park experts, or, you know, they don't.
The average, there's the swimmer versus waiter versus diver thing. Most people are just waiters.
Exactly.
They see something that looks fun. Let's go try it.
And they are happy to have us or have people in the park, especially staff, recommend something for them to do or push people towards something that they want to do. And in the same way that parades are used to kind of divert people, you know, guest flows and bring people to a certain part of the park, attractions, I think, could roughly do the same thing. Is if you have maybe the let's say I don't want to say any specific ride, but if there's a ride that has, let's say, on average, let's say most of the year, less than a 5-minute wait time, I would class that as a pretty unpopular attraction for whatever reason. Maybe it's outdated, maybe it's an IP that's not as popular anymore, whatever, right?
Or maybe the capacity is just really high
that
for
too.
the demand.
That too. But even if it's a high capacity ride, you should be pushing more people into it just to get them out of the queues of the other places.
Sure.
So if you had an experience that spilled out of the attraction, out into the city, out into the street, and pulled people and brought their attention, maybe it's a light show even, it doesn't have to be a character, something, an effect that happens, something that pulls people forward and through into the queue and lets people kind of get lost a little bit. And, you know, they think they're getting lost, but they're actually being guided and pushed into a queue that, again, maybe wouldn't have that many people normally.
And I think this is where gamification kind of comes in, because
True, yeah.
you know, we talked to the Ubisoft people a couple of years ago, and they talked about how in an interactive video game, it's like an open concept where you can basically roam anywhere in this virtual world.
Yeah.
But if you unlock certain abilities, quests, you complete a task, right? And so their idea was to use a theme park as their canvas, like a video game, where you would complete a quest, unlock a task, and that they can use that to get you to move further into a space, whether it's a restaurant or a retail location or whatever that is. So I think there's some of that gamification that's going to come out more as we move into the future.
And Knott's Berry Farm is a really great example of that too, Ghost Town Alive, where they have basically the gamification of the historic ghost town. And I've only been able to do it once, but they were saying actually one of the biggest complaints that they had from guests was that parents were coming into the park, paying a lot of money to go into the park, and all the kids wanted to do was stay in the ghost town. And the dads are sitting there going like, no, we have to at least get on 2 roller coasters.
2 rides, but you're right, that ghost town is actually kind of great. We spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, and it's a huge attraction now, where it used to be probably the quietest part of the park, maybe 15, 20 years ago. But that's a really great example of how do we redefine. We don't have to change too much, we don't have to invest too much, but they rethought about how the experience is there, and again, going back to gamification, they realize that there's a lot of value that the guests themselves bring into the experience versus having to be, here's your thrill, here's your story, here's it completely given to you on a platter. They're giving people an invitation, and people are accepting.
Right, and that's one of those things also that when it's gamified, it's repeatable.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe, Splash Mountain or whatever, right? It's the same every time, the same experience, which is good because you've controlled the story. 100%. So everyone's going to get the same exact story.
Yeah.
But when it's a game and you're competing,
yeah,
or at the very least, if you're being led, that experience can be different for every person.
Yeah.
And thinking about accessibility, it can be different depending on your abilities. Or a teenager versus a 4-year-old is going to have different needs and a different experience, and you can customize that either through an app or through at Harry Potter we have a wand.
Yeah.
There's talking about some tokens that Daniel's Woodland is creating that allows you to activate different story elements based on where you are, and actually selling these tokens now.
Oh, right.
Which I think is very interesting. So you can take a movie tour. I mean, like a museum tour, and put this disc that you purchased in a certain place and make the story come alive.
Yeah, that's great.
But also, if you're doing, let's say, a corn maze, you go and you're trying to hit every place in the maze, you can prove it by having your disc, record that you've been there.
Oh, right. Oh, that's great.
So, which is kind of cool.
And again, going back to the queues as well, is again, I've worked for a few companies where we talked about the gamification of queues themselves, and so even though the climax of the ride is, let's say, the actual ride itself is the same and catered, and as you said, something that is delivering on the story every single time. It's what the investors want, it's what the guests want, etc. Right? Is if we add a bit more gamification to the queue, maybe while you're waiting in line, you're going into line A, which has a certain story, or line B, or line C, and you've got then 3 full capacity queues that then create something a bit more unique that then takes a little bit longer to get through. But again, it's maybe something that we could do a little bit better on is it's hitting that sweet spot of how do we make this efficient, experiential, immersive, etc., all the keywords, right? Without bumping up the cost too much, where we have to design 3 separate queues and rides, and really showing up to it. So it's like, how do you create something that is different every single time, that then leads you to the same thing with less money? So
I think something I was thinking about earlier is just the idea of incremental sales. If you have a family entertainment center, every last little dollar matters, and if you can, your costs are fixed, your labor is roughly fixed, and your revenue is roughly fixed because your attendance is roughly the same every year.
Yeah.
You can give somebody a good experience that will add that last 2 or 3 or 5% to your bottom line. That can make a huge difference for the company. So just small interactive elements that you can add on and then sell them a good experience. That can really make a difference to a theme park
100%.
or any sort of location-based entertainment over the course of a year.
Yeah. Virtual, just going back to your question about virtual queues, is virtual queues are fine, but again, it's how different is that from our real world, I think people want to pay to go to a theme park for something different. We don't want to see more screens there. That's a whole other conversation, right? But it's more about what brings people together, and putting people on the ride as quick as you can is great for a bit, but what really brings people together is an ideal wait time, which includes anticipation, a little bit of narrative, a little bit of story, something that's adaptable to the guest experience, and then giving them a finale well-timed, like a well-paced film, right?
A payoff
at the end, a climax, and then they can do that again and again.
Yeah.
So that again, I would say is the goal, is to give a well-timed, as best as you can, a well-timed story experience, guest experience. I would say around 15-20 minutes. That includes a ride finale at the end. And I think there's a lot of companies that kind of forget that, unfortunately, or customers, guests, whatever, they, at the end of the day, always kind of think about that last bit, but it's the entire journey that we have to keep in mind.
And I think he really nailed the answer there to the problem of growing wait times at theme parks. The answer is a well-timed story with an ideal wait time of about 20 to 25 minutes that includes a great ride finale as a payoff for the entire experience. If you can find that balance, then even a long wait for Tron would seem like a breeze and would keep people coming back again and again. And that's what it's all about.
So there you go. So recap, I guess. The recap, yeah.
That is a good recap.
Yeah. So I think the recap is just that we, I think queues are, they obviously come a long way from where they were back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and we owe that to obviously these legendary designers from the last 20, 30, 40 years. and they're still innovating right now. And but there's still lots of places to go, and I'm really, really excited to see what we at Roadtrip Studios do next, but also what our industry peers do. There's obviously amazing parks coming up in the next 5-10 years all over the world. So just really excited to see where queues go, and hopefully we can obviously see some of this come into effect, and hopefully our guests will also notice the changes that are coming into the parks.
Yeah. Thomas Kelly, how do we get a hold of you if someone wants to get a hold of you?
Well, you can obviously reach out to me directly. So my email is thomas@roadtripstudios.com. We also have a newly launched website, which is still, got a few kinks to,
But by the time people hear this,
yes,
it will be perfect.
It will be perfect, 100%. We're so Roadtrip Studios is a London-based design studio, and we do anything from blue sky all the way to detail design, on-site art direction. It's a pretty small new studio, but again, very happy that the opportunities come my way, and it's been a blast to run. We're working on lots of amazing projects over the world, but just reach out to us either, again, to me directly, or I've got 5 team members as well. You can reach out to any of them, and you can also reach us at contact@roadtripstudios.com, which is on the website as well. So, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for talking to me today.
No worries.
It's always fun.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, likewise. Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great.